Did the Supreme Court talk about class actions in its opinions?
No, Senator, not directly that I recall.
Okay. Do you think one of the arguments, as I understand it, for universal injunctions, well, it's both an argument for and against, but that it impacts more than just the plaintiffs before the court. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
I've heard the argument made that a substitute, some would argue a more efficient substitute for universal injunctions would be a class action lawsuit. What do you think about that?
You know, a class action does allow relief beyond the named representative plaintiff.
There are Senate hearings that look boring on the surface, and then there are hearings where a single, simple question exposes a much bigger problem. This was one of those moments, when John Kennedy leaned forward and asked a judicial nominee a straightforward question. What's a universal injunction? It didn't sound dramatic. It didn't sound confrontational. But it was a trap. Because in Washington, when a senator asks a question that basic, they're not looking for a definition. They're testing whether the person in front of them actually understands the power they're asking to wield. And what followed told us a lot. The nominee gave a textbook answer. A universal injunction is a court order that applies beyond the parties before the court. On paper, that's correct. But Kennedy didn't stop there. He immediately anchored the discussion where it matters: the Supreme Court. He pointed out that the court has recently weighed in on universal injunctions and asked what it instructed lower courts to do. The nominee correctly referenced the ruling that universal injunctions are disfavored and that courts are limited to providing relief to the parties before them. That's not just legal trivia. That's constitutional gravity. Because universal injunctions allow a single judge to block federal policy nationwide, even when only a handful of plaintiffs are before the court. And the Supreme Court has made it clear that this practice pushes against the limits of judicial authority. This is why moments like this matter more than viral sound bites or shouting matches. They reveal how power is understood and whether those seeking lifetime appointments respect the constraints that come with it.
I understand.
Okay. Ms. St. John, what's a universal injunction?
A universal injunction refers to an injunction that applies universally beyond the parties to the case.
The Supreme Court has recently had something to say about universal injunctions, has it not?
Yes, Senator.
What did the Supreme Court instruct us?
Well, in Trump v. Casa, the Supreme Court held that universal injunctions are disfavored and courts are limited to awarding complete relief as to the parties before the court.
Did the Supreme Court talk about class actions in its opinions?
No, Senator, not directly that I recall.
Okay. Do you think one of the arguments, as I understand it, for universal injunctions, well, it's both an argument for and against, but that it impacts more than just the plaintiffs before the court. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
I've heard the argument made that a substitute, some would argue a more efficient substitute for universal injunctions would be a class action lawsuit. What do you think about that?
You know, a class action does allow relief beyond the named representative plaintiff. The class actions have a lot of additional safeguards set forth in Rule 23. And so, it does allow large groups of plaintiffs to come together in one case in a way that may not be, to seek relief in a way that bilateral litigation may not allow, but it does have additional protections.
Okay. Let me go back to Mr. Davis. Since we have our ATF nominee in front.
If you believe judges should interpret the law, not rewrite it. If you think nationwide policy should be decided through democratic processes, not single court orders, and if you care about how quietly power can shift, then this exchange deserves your attention. Like the video, subscribe for sharp political and legal breakdowns, and tell me in the comments, are universal injunctions a necessary tool or a dangerous shortcut? Because sometimes the most important questions sound simple until you realize what's really at stake.